Hi and good morning everyone. Today's topic is on budget and budgetary control. My name is Narina and I will start the presentation with the definitions of budget and budgetary control. Budget is a quantitative expression of a plan for a defined period of time. It may include planned sales volume and revenues, resource quantities, costs and expenses, assets, liabilities, and cash flows. By quantitative expression here means in monetary term. On the other hand, budgetary control is the establishment of budgeting system to formulate financial action plan for operations of an organization and systems to direct such finances to achieve the desired actions specified in the budget. It is a control technique whereby actual results are compared with budgets. Budgetary control is a process that is undertaken throughout the budget period where budgets and their targets are continuously examined for review or adjustment depending on performance. It is used as a means of making managers and heads of departments accountable for their actions and decisions. It also involves a process where positive or negative deviations or variances are determined. Deviations are responsibility of the key individuals who can exercise controls on budget, and they are required to report to the appropriate authority of any situations that might cause a change in the expected outcomes of the budget. Budgetary control also acts as a deterrent against misappropriations of funds. For the national budgetary control, Ministry of Finance is responsible to ensure that the expenditures of the country as a whole are always within the available resources of the country. Responsibility of the budgetary control lies with the respective heads or controlling officer of such organizations. The controlling officers are expected to ensure that their expenditures are within the planned budgets of the organizations. Budgetary control process include planning, controlling, implementation, and monitoring of fiscal policies and activities, including the reporting, audit, and the exercise of oversight responsibilities on the management of public funds. And the purpose of budgetary control process is to ensure allocations of the resources are in an efficient way. The main indicator of budgetary control process are budget formulation, budget approval, budget execution. In budget formulation, receipts and expenditures are being forecasted, and this is when the budget call, budget preparations, and budget submissions take place. Next, budget approval, where budget is held for discussion and negotiation for finalization and approval. And lastly, budget execution, which involve the Accountant General Department, Auditor General's Department, Parliament, and others for variance analysis and control, submissions of final and progression report, mid-year review of budget, monitoring, and finally, auditing takes place. Auditor General will audit, examine, and evaluate the financial performance of the government organization's budget plan. Control assumes that expenditure must agree with appropriation. Appropriation expresses the intent of the authorizing agent or the legislature. Control maintains information about the expenditure to preserve an audit trail. An audit trail is a sequence of documents such as invoices, receipts, and so on that permits a government or non-governmental auditor to reconstruct the transaction to determine whether the money was spent as it was intended.
Next features budgetary control system. The organization is broken down into various responsibility centers where each center is to carry out identified activities. A detailed plan is formulated into a comprehensive budget. The objective, outputs, and outcomes of the organizations are used as the base for measuring performance. A performance indicator is developed to monitor and evaluate the performance and progress of each responsibility center of the organizations. A continuous performance evaluation is carried out to determine the performance of the organization, which is output and outcomes in comparison with the budget. Types of budgetary control. First, fund control. Fund control refers to the procedure set up to ensure that the fund is properly kept and used in the right way. Second, revenue control. Revenue control refers to the procedure set up to ensure the collection of revenues of the governments from properly identified sources, and there are proper monitoring of such collections, and the revenue collected are accounted for properly in the correct funds and proper books of account. Third, expenditure control. This is the control procedure within the spending organizations to ensure that all spending is done exactly for the purposes that has been agreed. This is also known as vote control and exercised by the accounting officer of the organization. Under expenditure control, there are another four types of control. First, cost control. Cost control procedure to ensure the total incurred for any activity of an organization is within the right valuation. Cash control. Cash control ensure that spending plans for a period are made by a department based on approved vouchers, and cash forecasts need to be done to avoid any overspending requests that would lead to deficit. Payment or disbursement control. This procedure is to ensure that payment for any activities through preparation of payment vouchers is properly authorized. Last one, salary or payroll control. This control is to ensure that right amounts are paid to the right people in the organization and at the right time to avoid fraud and payment to non-existing workers. Advantages of budgeting and budgetary control requires a forces management to think about the future, to look ahead, to set out detailed plans for achieving the targets for each department, and to anticipate and give the organization purpose and direction. Promotes coordination and communication, clearly define areas of responsibility where managers of budget center are to be made responsible for the achievement of budget targets for the operation under their personal control, provide a basis for performance appraisal where actual performance is measured and assessed. Control is provided by comparison of actual results against budget plan. Deviation from budget can be investigated. The reason for deviation can be divided into controllable and non-controllable factors. Enables remedial action to be taken as variances emerge. Motivates employees by participating in the preparation of budget. Improve the allocation of scarce resources and economizes management time by using the management by exception principle. These features, types and advantages already presented in the class before the MCO.
Hi, it's Amna Atila binti Bahanuddin, and next I shall present decentralization and budgetary control. Decentralization is the process by which the activities of an organization, particularly those regarding planning and decision making, are distributed or delegated away from a central authoritative location or group. Decentralizing budget development can improve how a government plans for the future. Moving on to the concept of decentralization. The concept of decentralization is the key concept related to the devolution of higher authority to the lower management. Decentralization is also indicated by freedom, differentiation, and responsiveness, Cardwell 2003. It includes demand for less control and uniformity and subsequently reduce the size and cost associated with maintaining a large central bureaucracy. The concept of decentralization began in the late 1960s and 1970s in many Western countries such as England, United States, and Australia. These reforms took place in the government sectors, which moved from the conventional style of bureaucracy. Decentralization was identified as a tool for more effective decision making while delegating autonomy and responsibility to the lower management level, specifically for those who are accountable. Decentralized budget includes firstly, save time, secondly, engagement, thirdly, accuracy, fourth, vision, and lastly, but not least, the result. So what is responsibility centers? Responsibility centers can be defined as any functional unit in an organization headed by a manager who is responsible for the activities of that unit. This enables managers to monitor organizational functions. So there are four types of responsibility centers. So let's get through it together one by one. So firstly, we have revenue centers, an organizational unit in which outputs are measured in monetary terms but are not directly compared to input costs. Second, we have expense centers, an organizational unit where inputs are measured in monetary terms but outputs are not. Thirdly, we have the profit centers, an organizational unit where performance is measured by the difference between revenues, outputs, and expenditure, inputs. Lastly, but not least, we have the investment centers, an organizational unit where outputs are compared with the assets employed in producing them. Moving on, so in Malaysia, to assist responsibility centers in their budgetary control and management of expenditure and subsequently enhancing efficiencies in financial documents preparation, a system known as ESPKB was introduced. So what is ESPKB? So it was actually an abbreviation for electronic budgetary planning and control system, and it is an accounting system used to control the budget. That's all from me.
Assalamualaikum and good morning. My name is Warno Najimiatul Ashikin and I will proceed with Budget Environment Policy. The provision for environments is stated in Section 15 subsection 4 of the Financial Procedure Act 1957. Environment is a transfer of allocation between subheads within the same head. For example, a environment made between different departments of the same ministry. In the events where the allocation or proportions assigned to the subdivisions is insufficient or a new subdivision needs a further allocation, environments can be made from any other subdivision having a surplus of the same purpose of allocation. These environments must be approved by the Treasury at the federal level or the state financial authority provided that this amount have not exceeded a supply act or enactment. The purpose of the environment policy is to put in place a formal system of approval for such changes. It also assists chief officers and budget holders in the fulfillment of their budgetary responsibilities by setting out the rules under which resources can be transferred within a single budget or between budgets. Environment. In budgetary control systems, environment is an agreed practice in which funds may be transferred from one segment of the budget to another within a financial year. For example, a projected surplus in one budget may be used to cover another budget's deficit. The appropriate use of budget environments. There are occasions where environment is generally appropriate. These include adjustment to reflect changes that could not have been foreseen at the start of the year, such as the commencement of services partway through the year or significant reconfiguration of services. Next, where planned actions by managers mean that resources previously allocated for one purpose are no longer required for that purpose. Equally, there are occasions where environment is not generally appropriate, which are smoothing budget statement to mask underlying issues and using photoshops underspends to support pressures in other areas. Environments can either be action on a non-recurrent or recurrent basis. A non-recurrent environment is a one-off, temporary in-year adjustment, whereas a recurrent environment is action to reflect a more permanent budgetary adjustment. The distinction between recurrent and non-recurrent budget should be carefully observed. It is not permissible to use non-recurrent budgets for recurrent purposes. When preparing Viaments, it is essential that the materiality threshold is considered although there is not a strict minimum value. The finance team will likely reject requests where the impact of the change is deemed not material to the overall position of the service. The benefits of a budget Viament. First, to keep appropriate control over changes between different budgets and to support budget holders in the fulfillment of their overall budgetary responsibilities. Next, to assist in advising on the reported financial position. If budgets are to be effectively managed, it is essential that throughout the year, the chief officer and the director of finance have a shared understanding of the true position. And last but not least, to support compliance with standing orders and standing financial instructions. Viament process. The purpose of this procedure is to allow managers some flexibility to ensure that resources are employed effectively within the overall procedure framework. It should be noted that changes to staffing establishment must be done in accordance with the relevant section of standing financial instructions and scheme of delegation. Where expenditure is being planned and the source of funding is Viament from another budget, then prior approval for the Viament should be secured before the expenditure commitment is made. Where a Viament has been identified, the nominated budget holder should liaise within the finance department and complete the budget Viament request form. Appropriate authorization should be obtained prior to submitting the completed form to the finance department. Authorization can be provided either by signing the paper form or by email approval from budget managers in order to prevent the process from being unnecessarily elongated. Viament within cost centers. It is a Viament request form is not required where budget holders want to move funding within their area of responsibility. All budget holders can wire money between different lines within the same cost center providing, first, management cost targets are not exceeded, and establishment procedures are followed where transfers relate to pay budgets. A Viament form that can be raised by releasing budget holders or finance staff following the approval of budget movements. This can be authorized indirectly by email or directly by signing the form. In conclusion, budget control ensures the organization's actual activities and performance are indifferent from what is originally planned. Budgeting is part of management control process and very useful. Types of budgetary control are fund control, expenditure control and cost control, cash control and payment control. Thank you.